I saw his face, pale, almost colourless, with eyes that seemed too wide, too fixed on me. Don't open your door if you see him, not even a crack. Just stay inside, and whatever you do. I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, measured, circling my tent. Every nerve in my body told me he was moving, that any second I'd hear footsteps rushing up behind me. Every night it was the same, creaks, shifts, whispers so faint I couldn't tell if they were real. Hey, hello, welcome to ASMRk. I hope you are doing well as always. Today we have another compilation of scary stories taken straight from Reddit. Let's get straight to the first one. I hope you enjoy. I was commuting home from work later than usual that night. My office had kept me past 10, and by the time I reached the station, the place was mostly deserted. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, flickering every few seconds, throwing shadows across the tiled floor. Normally, the late trains still carried a scattering of passengers, tired workers, students, people heading home after a night out. But when the train screeched into the platform, only 2 other people got on with me. I boarded the last carriage, mostly out of habit. I liked the quiet, the sense of space. But as the doors slid shut and the train lurched forward, I realised I was completely alone in the car. The ride should have felt peaceful. Instead, there was weight in the air, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. I sat by the window, watching the tunnels whip past, and trying not to think about the fact that I couldn't even hear the sound of the other carriages. It was like I was sealed in, cut off from the rest of the train. 3 stops in, the doors opened, and someone stepped into my carriage. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing an oversized coat that looked decades out of style. He didn't glance at me, didn't acknowledge my presence at all. Instead, he walked the length of the carriage slowly, each footstep echoing in the hollow space. And then he sat several rows down across the aisle. I tried not to stare, but there was something off about him. His posture was stiff, unnatural, as if he wasn't entirely sure how to hold himself. His head tilted just slightly downward, his face hidden in shadow. I told myself he was just another late-night commuter, maybe tired, maybe drunk. But as the train rattled on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Every so often, I'd glanced up, and each time, he was already looking my way, not moving, not blinking, just watching. At the next stop, the doors opened again. No one else boarded. I thought the man might get off, but he stayed seated. The train pulled away, and I noticed something strange through the grimy windows. The platform signs didn't look familiar. I'd been riding this line for years, and I'd never seen names like the ones flickering past. The letters looked faded, almost distorted, like they'd been there for decades, and no one had bothered to replace them. I pulled out my phone, meaning to check the transit app, but of course, there was no service. The screen froze on, no signal. I glanced back toward the man. He was closer now. I hadn't seen him move, but he was 3 rows nearer, still staring. His lips were moving, faintly, silently, like he was whispering to himself. I gripped the edge of my seat, trying to decide whether to switch carriages at the next stop. But deep down, I already knew the next stop wasn't going to be any better. The train slowed again. I braced myself, waiting for the doors to open, waiting to bolt into another carriage. But when they slid apart, there was nothing. No platform, no station. Just blackness stretching beyond the doors, like an empty void. The air turned cold, sharp enough to sting my skin. The man stood up. For the first time, I saw his face, pale, almost colourless, with eyes that seemed too wide, too fixed on me. He didn't walk so much as drift down the aisle, each step too smooth, too quiet for the way the train shook beneath us. I scrambled toward the opposite door, slamming the emergency button, but nothing happened. The lights flickered, and for a split second, I swore the carriage was filled with more people. Figures packed shoulder to shoulder, all silent, all watching. Their faces were blurred, indistinct, like half-finished sketches. And then, just as suddenly, it was only him again. He leaned close as the door shut on the endless blackness. I could feel his breath against my ear when he whispered, "You shouldn't have sat in the last carriage." The train lurched forward once more, but the windows showed nothing. No tunnels, no lights, no city. Just an unbroken dark. That was 2 nights ago. The train never stopped again. I'd been living in my new apartment for about 6 weeks when things started happening. The building itself was nothing special. A squat, aging structure on the edge of downtown. The rent was affordable, and the landlord seemed nice enough, though he was a little vague when I asked why so many of the units were empty. People come and go, he told me with a shrug, jangling the keys. It's the city, you know how it is. I didn't think much of it at first. The place wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I spent the first couple of weeks unpacking slowly, making the 1-bedroom space feel like home. A second-hand couch, a kitchen table I found on Marketplace, a few framed photos of my friends from college, enough to make it comfortable. At night though, the building felt off. It was too quiet for downtown. I hardly ever heard neighbours through the walls, and when I did, it wasn't laughter or TVs or music. Just shuffling, muted thuds, and once a dragging sound that seemed to move from the ceiling to the floor. I brushed it off, but the first time I noticed something wasn't right was when I came home from work to find the bathroom light on. I was sure I'd turned it off that morning. I have a habit of double checking switches before I leave. Still, I figured maybe I'd been rushing, maybe I'd slipped up. It didn't matter, not then. About 2 weeks later, I woke up around 3 in the morning to use the bathroom. The hall light was on, not the warm yellow glow fixtures in my unit, but the fluorescent one in the hallway outside my door. It bled under the crack in the floor, too bright to ignore. That wouldn't have been strange, except the building used motion sensors. The lights usually clicked off after 30 seconds of inactivity. They never stayed on all night. I padded to the door, pressing my ear against it. I thought I heard something out there, a soft shuffle, slow, deliberate, moving back and forth across the hallway. I should have looked through the peephole. I still wonder why I didn't. But instead, I stood frozen, one hand hovering near the deadbolt, waiting for the sound to stop. When it finally did, I turned the lock and cracked the door an inch. The hallway was empty. But down at the far end, by the elevator, a figure stood. Tall, unmoving, his back to me. A man in what looked like a long, dark coat, head slightly bowed. I blinked and the light flickered. For a split second, the hallway was empty. Then he was there again. I shut the door so fast the frame rattled. The next morning, the hall lights were all off like normal. No sign anyone had been there. I told myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the light. Everyone sees strange things when they're half asleep. But things kept escalating. One night, I found muddy footprints in my kitchen, bare feet, too wide and long to be mine. They trailed from the balcony door to the fridge, then vanished halfway across the floor like they'd never been there. Another time, I woke up to the sound of water running. The bathroom faucet was on, full blast, splashing against the sink. I live alone. The scariest moment came a week later. I was lying on the couch, watching something unforgettable on TV. I caught movement in the reflection of the black glass screen as it cut to credits. Someone was standing behind me. I turned around, but the apartment was empty. The reflection showed a tall, thin man, the same outline I'd seen in the hallway. He was just a shadow, blurred and indistinct, but there was no mistaking the shape. I didn't sleep well that night, obviously, not even a minute. I finally broke down and asked about it. There was only one other tenant I'd seen regular, a woman a few years older than me. We'd exchanged nods in the stairwell before, but we'd never really talked. One evening, I caught her coming in from work and blurted out, "Hey, do you hear anything weird in the building?" She froze halfway through unlocking the door, eyes narrowing just slightly. "Weird how?" she asked. "Like footsteps in the halls, lights turning on in the middle of the night, stuff being moved around." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she exhaled through her nose, turned her key, and muttered, "You're in 6B, right?" I nodded. Her face tightened. She didn't look surprised, more like resigned. "Don't open your door if you see him, not even a crack. Just stay inside, and whatever you do." She trailed off, shaking her head, and slipped into the unit without finishing. I stood there in the hall, my skin crawling, listening to the sound of her deadbolt sliding shut. That night, I dreamed of the man, standing in the corner of my bedroom, watching, waiting. When I woke up, the balcony door was wide open. It's been 3 days since then. Every night I hear him closer. The steps don't just pace the hall anymore. They circle my living room, drag past the couch, pause outside my bedroom door. Last night I heard the faintest sound of breathing from the other side of the wall, steady and deliberate, like someone was pressed flat against the plaster, listening to me. I don't know if he ever really leaves. Sometimes I think I catch glimpses of him in broad daylight now, reflected in the microwave door, blurred in the bathroom mirror, always a step behind me, always where I can't quite focus long enough to prove he's there. I haven't told anyone else. What would I even say? My neighbour barely acknowledged it, and the landlord, I don't think he'd care. But tonight feels different. He's closer. I'm writing this from the couch. The TV is off. The apartment is dark. And from the corner of the room, just beyond where the light from the street lamp reaches, I can see him, standing perfectly still, waiting. I'd been working non-stop for months when I finally decided to take a weekend for myself. A co-worker suggested I check out Ashwood Trail, a quiet hiking route that wound deep into a state forest about 3 hours north of the city. It wasn't a big tourist spot. In fact, most people in town hadn't even heard of it. But there was a few online posts praising the solitude, and the pictures looked beautiful. Endless trees, streams cutting through mossy rocks, campsites tucked into quiet clearings. That's what I needed. Silence, space, somewhere no one could bother me. I left Friday afternoon and reached the trailhead just as the sun was dipping behind the trees. The lot was empty, except for an old silver pickup parked crooked across 2 spaces. Its bed was filled with tarps, ropes, and something covered by a faded blue sheet. I didn't think much of it. People leave odd things in trucks all the time. I grabbed my pack, locked my car, and started down the trail. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. The forest had this dense, suffocating stillness. No highway hum, no distant chatter, just the occasional snap of a twig under my boots. It was exactly what I'd been hoping for. I set up camp near a bend in the trail, where the trees opened up like a small clearing. There was an old stone firing, which told me others had stayed there before. I cooked a simple meal, sat by the fire, and listened to the woods settle into the night. That's when I noticed it, a light in the distance. It wasn't the flicker of another campfire. This was steady, a pale, white glow, pulsing faintly through the trees, maybe 100 yards away. I figured it was a lantern. Someone else must have been camping nearby. But it didn't move. Not once in the hour I watched it. It just stayed where it was. Eventually, I convinced myself it was probably nothing. A reflection. Maybe even a porch light from a cabin further off on the trail. I climbed into my tent, zipped the flap, and tried to sleep. Sometime past midnight, I woke to the sound of footsteps, slow, measured, circling my tent. I held my breath, clutching the knife I kept in my pack. Whoever it was didn't speak, didn't try to open the tent, just walked around once, then again, and then stopped. unzip the flap at dawn. The clearing was empty. I debated turning back, but stubbornness kept me on the trail. By late afternoon, I found myself on a ridge overlooking a valley of trees. That's when I saw movement below. A figure. Someone standing motionless among the trees, far off but unmistakable. I raised a hand, squinting to see better, but they didn't move. After a moment, I realised they were facing me, watching. A chill went through me, and I hurried down the trail, refusing to look back until I reached another clearing. That night, the light returned, same pale glow, this time closer. I tried to convince myself it was hikers, maybe someone with an electric lantern, but no voices, no crackling fire, just that unwavering light in the woods, shifting slightly side to side, like it was searching for something. I packed my things in the dark, deciding I'd head back at first light. When dawn came, the light was gone, but the forest felt different, too quiet. As I hiked back, I realised I hadn't heard a single bird all morning. No squirrels, no insects buzzing near my ears, just silence. Halfway to the trailhead, I spotted something on the ground. A tarp, blue, weather-worn, crumpled by the roots of a tree. The same kind I'd seen in the back of that silver pickup. And underneath it, the impression of something long and heavy, like it had been wrapped up and dragged across the forest floor. My stomach turned and I picked up my pace. When I finally reached the lot, my car was the only one there. The truck was gone. I drove straight home, hands trembling the entire time. I haven't told anyone about it until now, and I can't shake the feeling that whoever or whatever was out there hasn't finished looking for me. I used to cut through the cemetery, not because I liked it, not because I was one of those people who thought cemeteries were peaceful, but because it was the fastest way home. The town I grew up in was small, and the cemetery sat right in the middle, stretching from Main Street to the back roads that led toward the apartment complex where I lived. The quickest way home from work meant passing through that gate, weaving through rows of headstones, and out the other side. The first few times I hated it. Even during the day, it felt wrong. All those names carved into stones, all those tiny plots of earth. I'd catch myself walking faster than normal, shoulders tense, like something was watching. But eventually, like anything else, I got used to it. By late October, the sun was setting earlier. I'd finish my shift at the diner, step out into the chill, and by the time I reached the cemetery gates, the sky would already be dimming. That's when I started to notice the man. The first time, I just thought it was a trick of the light. I'd been cutting diagonally across the cemetery, my breath clouding in the cold air, when I saw the man, standing among the stones, not moving. He was off to the left, maybe 20 or 30 yards away, dressed in dark clothing, though I couldn't see much detail. He wasn't walking, wasn't visiting a grave, just standing between two markers, facing in my direction. I glanced, looked away, and then glanced back, and he was still there, same posture. I kept walking, trying to act like I hadn't noticed him. The next night, he was there again, Same spot, same stillness. By the third night, I couldn't tell myself it was a coincidence anymore. My shortcut had taken me past a dozen different sections of the cemetery, but he was always in roughly the same area, always motionless, always turned toward me. I mentioned it casually to a co-worker, and she shrugged it off. Probably just some guy, she said. People do weird things in cemeteries. Some of them hang around to spook kids. But this didn't feel like that. This didn't feel like anything I could explain. The night I almost turned back, it was colder than usual. A thin mist clung to the grass, and the trees around the cemetery rattled with dead leaves. Halfway through, I saw him. Only this time, he wasn't in the distance. He was closer. Not standing in his usual place, but about 10 yards away from the path, between two tilted stones. I froze and my mouth went dry. The light from the street lamps didn't quite reach where he stood, but I could make out his outline. His head slightly tilted, as if he was watching me carefully. My instincts screamed at me to turn around, to go back the way I came, but the idea of passing through the gates again, with him standing so near, was worse. So I walked faster. My shoes crunched against the gravel, echoing louder than I wanted them to. I kept my eyes fixed forward. Every nerve in my body told me he was moving, that any second I'd hear footsteps rushing up behind me. But there was nothing, just silence. I made it out the back gate, lungs burning, and didn't stop until I was halfway down the block. I didn't use the cemetery for the next 3 nights. I walked the long way home, 20 minutes added to my route, just to avoid that place. But eventually, convenience won out. I told myself it had been a fluke, that maybe he'd been visiting a grave. So, against every better instinct, I went back. The cemetery was quiet when I stepped in, colder than usual, and the mist thicker. My breath puffed out in small clouds. At first, there was no sign of him, just rows of headstones, some leaning, some cracked. I let out a shaky laugh. Maybe I'd been paranoid. Maybe it wasn't real. Then I saw it. A shape, further down the path, directly in front of me. He wasn't off to the side this time. He was standing on the path itself, blocking my way forward. I stopped dead. I couldn't see his face. The shadows were too deep, but I could feel him watching me, every inch of me screaming to run back, to leave, but my body was locked in place. And then he moved, not quickly, not aggressively, just one step forward. A single step was enough for me, and I ran out of there. I didn't care about dignity or silence. My shoes slipped on wet grass as I cut across rows of graves, stumbling over uneven ground, heart hammering in my chest. I didn't stop until I'd thrown myself through the back gate and into the streetlights beyond. When I turned to look, he wasn't there. The path was empty. I never used the shortcut again. Even now, years later, I still dream about that night. The way he stepped forward, the way the air seemed to close in, as if the cemetery itself wanted me to stay. And I wonder, if I hadn't run, how close would he have got? When I moved into the house on Harlow Street, I wasn't expecting much. It was a 2-story rental with faded wallpaper, smell of dust clung no matter how many windows I opened. It had been sitting empty for months. The landlord told me the last tenant had left suddenly, but didn't elaborate. I didn't push. Rent was rent, and this was the only place I could afford. The first night was uneventful until I went to bed. Around 2 a.m. I woke up to a sound, faint but distinct, a light, steady creak, as if someone was walking slowly across the upstairs landing. I told myself it was probably just the house. Old wood did that. But then I heard it again. This time, it was closer. A floorboard groaning under weight, followed by silence. I lay frozen, ears straining, the darkness pressing against me. Finally, I turned on the lamp. The room lit up, empty. No shadows moving, no one outside my door, just my heart thundering. Eventually, I convinced myself it was nothing, just nerves, first night in a new place and all that. But deep down, I didn't believe that. Over the next week, the noises became regular. It wasn't just creaks. Sometimes it was faint tapping, like something brushing the wall from the other side. Sometimes it was the sound of fabric shifting, as if someone was moving just out of sight. I started keeping track. It always happened between 1:30 and 3 a.m. Never during the day, never when friends visited. It was only when I was alone. One night, I decided to test it. I stayed awake, lights off, waiting. At 1:42 a.m. it began. A long, slow creak in the hallway. Then silence. Then another, closer this time. The air in the room seemed to change, heavier, like the house was holding its breath. I sat up, every nerve screaming. Then I heard it, a faint exhale. It wasn't mine. It came from the corner of the room. I scrambled for the lamp, switched it on. Nothing. The corner was empty. By the second month, I was unravelling. Every night it was the same. Creaks, shifts, whispers so faint I couldn't tell if they were real or just blood rushing in my ears. I stopped inviting people over. How could I explain that I was terrified of my own bedroom? My co-workers noticed the bags under my eyes. I made excuses. Bad mattress, too much coffee. But the truth was worse, because the sounds were getting bolder. One night, I left my phone recording while I slept, and in the morning, I listened. Most of it was silence. Then, at 2:13 a.m., there it was. A long, dragging creak, followed by a voice. Just one word. My name. Whispered, drawn out. I deleted the file instantly, but I couldn't delete the memory of hearing it. At night, I moved my mattress into the living room. I thought maybe if I put some space between me and the upstairs, it would stop. But around 2 a.m, I woke up to a sound above me. Footsteps, crossing the bedroom floor, directly over where I lay. I couldn't take it anymore. I started sleeping with the lights on, a baseball bat at my side, though I knew a weapon wouldn't matter against whatever this was. One night, I sat awake in the living room, every lamp blazing, the TV on low just for background noise. For hours, nothing happened. I almost convinced myself it was over. Then, at exactly 2 a.m, the TV flickered. The sound got out for a split second. When it came back, the room was silent, too silent, and then I heard it. Not upstairs this time, not in the hallway, but right behind me. A sharp inhale, as if someone had leaned down just over my shoulder. I spun around so fast the chair toppled. No one was there. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I didn't sleep much after that at all. I left the house a week later, packed up and drove away without telling the landlord. I left the key on the kitchen counter and never looked back. But sometimes, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I still hear it. That sound, a floorboard creaking, a breath in the dark, and the feeling that, wherever I go, it followed me. So that is the last story for today. I hope you enjoyed all of them. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, take care